After I consulted the first initial teaser for The Exchange Season 1, I did promise you a teaser consultation, or a trailer consultation as well in the near future whenever one would debut. And as of either today or a couple days ago, I forget when this debuted, but we have a new trailer to consult with The Exchange to get a better look at it. Because it was very much a teaser that we first saw, and it was an initial glimpse, and I do think I need to take a bit of a deeper lens with it. Even though I will say there were points to it that I said, at least on my summation, in my judgment, were competent. Other points perhaps concerned me as to the potential reach that the show could have. And Netflix has done pretty well in the past with varied programs, especially among the international space. They've had some pictures, for example, let's say Squid Game, that have done gangbuster ratings, and there's others as well, but maybe there's some other pictures that perhaps don't fare to that reach. And maybe they're equally as competent. Maybe they just don't necessarily attract an audience. I have looked at the viewing figures as it exists today, as of February 4th of this new year, and currently I believe the teaser is sitting around 180,000 views. And Netflix can draw a pretty substantial crowd of the public in terms of engagement with a marketing piece for some of their shows, especially their more high-profile ones. So it's a relatively small window of people that are, I guess, considering this release and even having looked at it. I can consult my viewing figures as well and see that the initial teaser didn't get as much engagement as maybe by comparison other Netflix shows have. And I think there's a variety of details to that. Now, in terms of competence, I think the historical background of this series, as well as the very sophisticated plot presentation on pitch, given that, if you're not familiar with it, it's set in Kuwait back in the late 80s, with two female protagonists who are trying to get into, I guess, the stock exchange scene in the Kuwait business atmosphere. And this is in the midst of Saddam Hussein. I'm kind of extracting details again from a review, because I consult a lot of work, so I've forgotten. So forgive me if I'm taking some glances. I'm trying to remember the details here. But Saddam Hussein's invading at this point in the context of this series. So there's a lot of depth to it. And I do think it was at least inspired by some true story connections. I think they did articulate that in the teaser, if I'm not mistaken on that. And the presentation itself, I thought, was quite opulent and engaging visually. It's a very colorful series. I don't necessarily think, though, it has the biggest reach. And on the pitch, business-type shows, that is a very limited window. I gave this example in the past as well. I think back with Iron Fist, and that was a chief complaint with the first season. The Marvel show, if you're not familiar, or one of them at the time, that was very business-centered, especially on the introductory episodes. And a lot of people thought that was a bit slower in pacing and less approachable rather than the Kung Fu series they were promised. So I'm very familiar with these types of shows, while sophisticated, and some might do well. And there were other problems as to why I think Iron Fist didn't fare the best, even though I liked the business angle with the first season. I was interested by that. This series could go either way. I think the sophistication of what it boasts is interesting, and I am intrigued by the social commentary aspect, especially in regards to world politics. Because I'm not as familiar with political or social matters in the Kuwait scene. So as an information piece, I do consider this a bit of a teachable experience. But I am not going to just, throw out as a blanket judgment that, I'm brought in and totally fine on social commentary alone. It has to be made approachable, and it has to be palatable to a general audience. And that's where I think The Exchange falters a bit, because this is very much rooted, I would say, in a feminist advocacy piece on part of, again, I think it's fascinating to make this quite clear, the world politics angle. But it has an energy to it that feels very dated, especially in articulation. I do feel for the general audience, for those of us who might look at the modern feminist movement as it exists, and while I'm not necessarily opposed to, the women's rights movement, especially as it exists in history, the third wave movement, I have a bit of a criticism on, or you could say modern feminism. And there's language within the context of a trailer that I feel is not only a bit of a put-off, and makes us again feel, let me say this another way, and I made this point again in the initial teaser. Modern feminism as a movement, a platform, had, I would say, a real heyday in the 2014 to 2016 time period, on part because it was getting a lot of attention, not just in the advocacy side, but also the response. But in the time since, Though, of course, I'm all for keeping an open door on situations that matter, and if there needs to be improvement, then, let's open up discussion. Let's keep an open door on that. Commentary in itself has been a bit disengaging for, I think, a lot of people. And in the 2023 year, we're seeing in other entertainment ventures a tiresome acceptance, or not really an acceptance, a warding off. I think, for example, let's say the She-Hulk series, which tried to, as I understand, I haven't finished covering it yet, or even watched it, but I understand from some of the feedback that I've heard mention of, the show tried to take on like a very pro-feminist type angle, and it just did not fare well with a lot of people generally. A lot of people were put off by that, including a lot of women that I saw. And I see the show, in this case with The Exchange, I read some of the lines, and I did feel on the depiction, while it could be quite good, and again, I'm open to social commentary, and I'm open to, exploring perhaps sex-related equality matters within Kuwait. I know nothing about that. I think it's, again, the world politics angle gives us a bit of an originality in the social commentary sphere, and it's a bit of a departure from studying it in America, at the very least, so it feels fresh. I felt that the betrayal, not only perhaps in some of the childness in the way that the men seemed to behave, it felt a bit demeaning. Like, almost the men were kind of painted as a joke, just slightly. Although this could be bending a bit of a humor angle. I'm not exactly sure, even though IMDb credits it more so as a drama. And I sense that sophistication in the story. There's also a line in there where one of the women's like, the whole world, maybe paraphrase, but she was like, the whole world's a patriarchy. That type of language immediately puts people off. Not just men. I'm thinking, of women that I know who want nothing to do with the modern feminist movement that exists. And so I'm thinking about this show in terms, and I say this again in consideration of the audience, how much appeal does this show have? While I'm open to at least exploration, you have to make it approachable. And I do feel that this show, in certain capacities, risks its acceptance in a general assembly. So while I feel that this show could have potential, I see points of risk where it could ward off said reach. But let's consult the trailer. Like I said, I wanted to give us a bit of a deeper look to best gauge it. Because a trailer, that's just an initial tease. Let me be fair and give a holistic and more informed opinion on a much longer realization of what we're going to be expecting with this show. Here we go.
مطلقة ولا قاعدة بالبيت 13 سنة ما اشتغلت.
And maybe it's the characters' journeys that'll be more compelling. Maybe that's what will embolden the series.
كوزين أنا عايشة بعالمين منفصلين. عالم يخصني وعالم يخصها.
Again, like I said, quite an opulent series.
إيه منور أنا عشان كذي جايتك بتقولين إن عندك بزنس؟ عندي. أنا أشتغل في بورصة الكويت. هذا مكتبك. والله صراحة أنا لي الشرف إني أكون معاكم.
حياك الله بأقوى فريق بالبورصة.
هذا مكان الشاي والقهوة. لا تخليه
So I got the basis being set here.
شاي؟ هل أنت شنو عبالك جاية تسوين؟ تعقدين صفقات مع شركات؟
مالك؟
So she's dissatisfied of her position.
أنا ما أشوف إن في بنات غير نحمي.
شو بشر الله صابك؟
يا إحنا يا أم. ليش نساعد بعض؟ مو أحسن؟ اتفقنا.
كذي احنا سوينا خطوتين. شو يصير ساعتها؟ نربح من وراء خسارة هسه.
في عملية تداول البنك بيشتغل عليها واعتقد انه يبون نكذب.
بس هذا موقف صعب. انت محتاجة الى شجاعة علشان تعززين موقفك.
I like seeing that there are male characters here that are supported, and it's not necessarily. It doesn't feel we're being exclusive to one side. This is based on a true story, so I'll give it some, credit for that, and some room to expand its story. I do see strength in the emotional delivery. And I think this cooperative I was going to say exchange, but it's really on point. I think this collaborative effort on part of these two women to level up and get into the stock exchange scenes, I'm all for that in terms of like self-empowerment. I think it's a great idea in terms of a story point to go down. This trailer gives me a bit of a better perspective. I don't necessarily think it's perfect. There was one line, again, like I said, in terms of scripting, towards the beginning, like, wow, women are multiplying. It kind of, again, feels, and I get it, right? This might be the situation in Kuwait at the time, so this could be very historically accurate. But even then, again, like I said, if you're going to talk about, like, in comparison to historical feminism versus modern feminism, that whole line in the beginning about the, patriarchy, that felt very modern in expression. So, again, you tell a strong story by all measures, but still make sure that your story is generally palatable and approachable. And that's where you sometimes have to be careful, especially when it concerns certain movements that have gotten a bit of a aura of animus from the general field of people, especially on viewership. And that's what Netflix wants primarily. They want viewers. I don't necessarily know how long this particular story has in its longevity. Maybe it's just going for a mini-series run. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe that is the point. Maybe they're not trying to go for multiple seasons, so it could just be a one-off. I think some points to it are quite interesting. I think the realization is it has a business feel, especially when they get into the stock exchange scene, like in the physical environment. It's a good set. And I like the effort put in, obviously, to the costumes and the visuals and what everybody's, interacting with in their particular scenes. It feels like a physical realization of a very authentic show. It's incredibly realistic in its articulation. I just wonder again how approachable it is to the series. And again, I'm open to social commentary, but it has to be nuanced, balanced, and approachable. And as I look at this trailer, it feels a bit better to me than the teaser did. This is why I like to give you an expanded look, and I'm like, oh, no, don't necessarily judge on a first, look at it. I do feel perhaps maybe some points of mistakes. We'll see. But I think what the trailer depicts here is a bit fairer. And as, again, like a self-empowerment journey, where you do see that there are some men who are depicted in a kinder manner, but they seem to be influential in helping these women succeed and get into that realm of business that they aspire to get into, and with that ambition. I like seeing that balance. It doesn't feel exclusionary, whereas maybe with other shows, sometimes what you might see is one side is put higher than the other, and so it feels like a general imbalance. Whereas in society, men and women, we interact with each other all the time. It's a collaborative meshing. And there isn't necessarily this animus among every person, right? So then to see some shows come along and be like, well, we're going to reinforce that type of negativity, it isn't approachable to a lot of people because it doesn't feel realistic, and it does feel traditional to the last couple of years, at least especially in media adaptations of said movement. You want to be fair. And I think with this particular trailer, because it's more centered on the women's stories, it gives me a better anticipation and interest. I'm curious to watch it. I don't necessarily feel that it's the show that's, strongest in its pull to watch. Maybe I'll check it out at some point. We'll see. I'll keep an open mind about it. But this trailer gives me a better impression. And I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on it down below. I tried to be fair in my articulation. I just had some concerns going in and watching the teaser and considering, again, overall viewership and the potency of this release. The trailer, I think, still had some errors with maybe some of its scripting. It could have had some lines that were better reworked. This looks good, though. If it's more centered again on these two particular ladies working their way up into the stock exchange scene, that's more so the stories encircling their journey of self-empowerment in that respect. And it is balanced, right? So that each side, it feels fair. And it's not like, we're picking on one side while elevating the other. It feels like no one's being unreasonably denigrated. I think this is good. provides an interesting window. We'll have to see what its reach is. Again, like I said, I don't necessarily think it's the most potent of Netflix releases, but I tried to be fair in covering it, and I do think there are some points of strength to it that are worth considering. Done. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.